My wife told me her ex was coming to Christmas dinner, 15 minutes before we sat down. Then my grandson looked at the man in my doorway and said, "That's Grandma's new husband." What would you do if you were me? Before you judge me, read to the end and tell me whether I did the right thing. And if you've ever been blindsided by the person you trusted most, I want your opinion. My name is Simon Stillwater. I'm 67 years old, a retired contractor who spent 40 years building other people's homes before I finally built a quiet life of my own. I'm a husband, a father of 2, and a grandfather of 3. Christmas at my house wasn't just tradition. It was my proof that after everything, my family still had a center. Linda and I had been married 11 years. She wasn't the mother of my kids, but she'd been around long enough that people called her Grandma Linda without thinking twice. I believed she loved that role. I believed she loved me. Christmas Eve was my domain. I smoked the turkey myself, carved it myself, set the table myself. Linda liked the decorating and the photos, the cozy part. I liked the work that made it real. That afternoon, the house smelled like butter and rosemary. My daughter Melissa arrived first with her husband and the kids. My son Ethan followed with a pie he'd clearly bought last minute. The grandkids ran through the hallway like a stampede, their socks sliding on hardwood. The noise made the house feel alive. At 4:45 p.m., while I was in the kitchen basting the turkey, Linda came in with her phone in her hand and a look on her face I didn't recognize. "Simon," she said too carefully, "Brad is coming." I blinked. "Brad who?" She didn't like that question. Her chin lifted. "Brad, my ex." For a moment I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I'd heard about Brad the way you hear about a storm that once hit a town, a story from before you moved there. The name came up once in a while, usually when Linda wanted to paint herself as someone who'd survived a hard past. "You invited him," I said, "to my house, to Christmas dinner." "It's not like that," she replied quickly. But the words didn't match her tone. Her tone was steady, prepared. "He's alone, and it's Christmas." I set the baster down slowly. "Linda, you're telling me this 15 minutes before dinner." She crossed her arms. "I didn't want you to overreact." That was the first time I realized she'd planned this, not the visit, the timing. "Overreact," I repeated, "to your ex showing up at my table." "It's one meal," she said. "Do it for the kids. Do it for the grandkids. Please." The way she said please wasn't a request. It was a command dressed up in holiday wrapping. I looked past her into the dining room, Melissa pouring drinks, Ethan setting out plates, my grandson Noah helping his little sister fold napkins like he was on a mission. My family was here, warm and unaware, and Linda had decided to drop a match into that room and see what burned. I kept my voice low. If he comes in here and disrespects me, he leaves. Her eyes narrowed. "You always have to be in control." That sentence landed wrong, like it belonged to an argument we hadn't had yet. The doorbell rang at 4:58. Linda didn't wait for me. She walked to the front door like she owned it, like she'd been waiting for a cue. I followed, wiping my hands on a towel that suddenly felt too clean for what was coming. When Linda opened the door, a man stepped inside with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged. Mid-50s, thick neck, expensive coat, hair cut too sharp for a guy who claimed he'd struggled. His smile was bright and wrong. "Linda," he said, like he was tasting her name. Then his eyes moved to me. "Simon." He didn't offer his hand. He didn't need to. The message was clear. I was not a man he came to meet. I was furniture in the room he wanted. Melissa looked up first, confusion on her face. Ethan followed, his brow furrowing. The grandkids stopped running. The energy shifted the way it does when a dog growls in the middle of a party. Noah stepped forward, staring at the man's face like he was solving a puzzle. Noah was 8, smart enough to read people, innocent enough to say what adults swallow. His voice cut through the silence. "That's Grandma's new husband." The room went still. I felt the words hit me in the chest like a blunt object. Not because a child said them, because a child believed them. Linda's face flashed, something fast and sharp, then she smiled too widely. "Noah, sweetheart, don't be silly." Brad chuckled, as if the kid had made a cute joke at his expense. "Kids say the funniest things." Noah didn't smile. He looked at Linda, then at me, and I saw uncertainty begin to creep into his face like a shadow. "But Grandma told me," he insisted. "She said you were going to be our new grandpa, and she said not to tell." Melissa's hand went to her mouth. Ethan's eyes moved to mine, silent, panicked, like he wanted me to fix it, like he didn't understand that the thing breaking wasn't a plate, it was me. Linda's voice sharpened. "Noah, go wash your hands." Noah hesitated, then obeyed. But his eyes stayed on me as he walked away. He looked guilty, like he'd done something wrong by telling the truth. Brad stepped farther into the house, looking around at the decorations, the food, the family photos on the wall. He studied my life the way a man studies property. "Well," he said, loud enough for everyone, "this is cozy." Linda laughed too quickly. "Brad, stop." I didn't move. I didn't raise my voice. But inside, something clicked into place. 15 minutes before dinner. A surprise guest who wasn't just an ex. A child instructed to keep secrets. A man walking into my home like he had the deed in his pocket. This wasn't a social visit. This was an announcement. Melissa cleared her throat. "Mom, who is this?" Linda's eyes didn't leave my face. "This is Brad, an old friend." Brad smiled again, that same bright, wrong smile. "Old is right. Linda and I go way back." Ethan stepped forward. "Dad didn't know you were coming." Brad's gaze slid to Ethan with mild amusement. "Yeah, I can see that." That's when I noticed what he carried in his hand. A leather folder, thick, neat, like paperwork. He caught me looking and tucked it under his arm as if it meant nothing. My house, full of my family, and a stranger brought documents. Linda clapped her hands like a hostess trying to restart a party. "Okay, everyone, dinner is ready. Let's sit. It's Christmas. Let's just be grateful." We moved to the dining room like actors forced onto a stage. The kids climbed into their seats. Melissa's husband tried to make small talk that died in his mouth. Ethan sat stiff, jaw tight. Brad took the seat Linda indicated, across from me, as if she'd planned the angles. And she sat beside him, not beside me. Not an accident, not a mistake. A choice. I served the turkey. I passed the potatoes. I made my hands steady because my grandkids were watching, and I refused to become a spectacle in front of them. Brad talked like he'd practiced. He told stories about old times, each one ending with Linda laughing a little too loud. He made comments about the house, about the neighborhood, about how nice it must be to have things set up this way. Then, halfway through the meal, he leaned back and said casually, "So, Simon, Linda told me you're retired." "I am?" I replied. "Must be nice," Brad said. "To have time, to slow down." I looked at him. "It's nice to have earned it." He smiled. Sure. I'm just saying, life changes. People change. Sometimes you realize you're in the wrong place." Linda's hand touched his arm under the table. I saw it. So did Melissa. Ethan's fork clinked against his plate. Brad continued. "Linda and I have been talking. We've been reconnecting." No one breathed. Linda finally spoke. "Simon, don't make a scene." I stared at her. He's the one making speeches in my house. Brad raised both hands in a mock surrender. "Hey, I'm not here to fight. I'm here for Christmas. For family." Melissa's voice shook. "Mom, What is going on? Linda's eyes hardened. What's going on is that I'm tired. I'm tired of living with someone who thinks love is a schedule and control is the same thing as safety. I laughed once quietly because it was either that or flip the table. What are you talking about? I asked. Brad slid the leather folder onto the table. There's no need to get ugly, he said. We can do this the clean way. Ethan stood up. What is that? Brad didn't look at him. His eyes stayed on me. A proposal. An agreement. Linda's been unhappy for a long time, Simon. You know that. I did not know that. I knew Linda liked nicer candles, bigger holiday photos, and compliments from strangers. I knew she could turn cold when she didn't get her way. But unhappy? No. That was the story she was writing now so she could justify whatever came next. Linda's voice was calm, rehearsed. I want a separation. At Christmas dinner, Melissa whispered, horrified. Brad tapped the folder. We're adults. We don't need to pretend. I looked down at the folder. My name was printed on a document visible through a clear sleeve. And there it was, in black and white. A prepared separation agreement. Not drafted today. Not last week. The paper looked too crisp, too planned. And the clauses, visible even from where I sat, were bolded in places, as if someone had highlighted the parts that mattered most. Linda leaned forward. You'll keep the retirement account. I'll take the house. The room spun. The house, I repeated, voice flat. Brad's smile widened. Makes sense, right? She'll need stability. Ethan slammed his palm on the table. Dad paid for this house. He owned it before. Linda snapped. Enough, Ethan. Noah's little sister started to cry quietly, sensing the fear without understanding it. Melissa whispered, Mom, you can't do this. Linda's eyes flicked to the kids, then back to me. Watch me. And in that moment, I understood the full cruelty. She didn't pick a lawyer's office. She didn't pick a quiet conversation. She picked a stage with an audience I would never want to hurt. She picked my grandkids as a shield, knowing I wouldn't explode. Brad leaned in, voice lower, like he was offering mercy. Sign it tonight, Simon. Make it easy. Linda deserves a fresh start. The turkey on my plate turned to ash in my mouth. But instead of shouting, instead of making it the disaster Linda clearly wanted, I did the one thing she didn't plan for. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was clear. I set my napkin down and stood. Melissa, I said gently, take the kids to the living room. Put on a movie, something loud. Melissa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. She gathered Noah and his sister and my youngest grandchild. Ethan helped, his movements stiff, protective. Brad watched them go with a look that irritated me more than anything he'd said. He looked like a man who enjoyed the mess he made. When the kids were out of earshot, I spoke quietly. This dinner is over, I said. Brad, you leave. Linda's lips curled. No. Brad didn't move. You can't just throw me out. Oh, I can, I said. Linda tilted her head. Or what? You'll call the police? In front of your family? Over Christmas? There it was, the trap. She wanted me loud. She wanted me angry. She wanted a story where I was the monster and she was the brave woman escaping. I nodded slowly. No, Linda, I won't call the police. Brad's smirk returned. I reached into my pocket and took out my phone. I pressed one button. A small red dot appeared on the screen. Brad's smirk faltered. Linda's eyes widened a fraction. I'd started recording the moment Noah said new husband. Not because I was clever, because something about Linda's timing felt like a setup, and 40 years in business taught me one rule. When someone tries to rush you, they're trying to steal something. I held the phone up. Say it again, I told Linda. Tell me you want the house. Linda's voice sharpened. Turn that off. Brad leaned forward. That's not legal. It's my house, I said, and I'm recording a conversation in my own home because you walked in here with divorce papers like it's a holiday gift. Linda's calm cracked. Simon, stop. I smiled again, colder this time. No. Brad stood abruptly. You're being dramatic. I stepped closer, not threatening, just present. Brad, leave. Linda's voice turned venomous. You think you can scare me? You're old. You're tired. You're replaceable. Replaceable. That word was the knife. I nodded once, as if I'd expected it. All right. I walked out of the dining room and into my home office. I heard them behind me, Linda hissing, Brad muttering, the chairs scraping. They thought I was retreating. I wasn't. In my office, I opened a locked drawer and pulled out a folder of my own. A folder Linda didn't know existed. Inside were copies of the deed, the trust documents, and a letter from my attorney that I'd updated the previous spring after a friend got destroyed in a messy divorce. I'd put the house into a living trust, not to hide money, not to punish Linda, to protect my grandkids if anything happened to me, because I'd seen too many families tear each other apart over property. Linda's name was not on that trust. Linda had been happy to let me handle the boring paperwork. I walked back into the dining room holding the folder and set it on the table next to Brad's. Brad looked at it, suspicious. Linda looked at me like she suddenly remembered I wasn't helpless. You want the house, I said to Linda. That's what you're here for. Linda didn't answer. Brad tried to. She deserves it. I opened my folder and slid the deed copy across the table. The house isn't yours to take, I said. It isn't even mine in the way you think. It belongs to the trust. Brad stared at the paper, then looked up. That's nonsense. It's recorded with the county, I replied. Linda's face drained of color. I watched the realization hit her like a wave. The stage she built, the timing, the folder. None of it mattered if she couldn't get what she came for. Brad recovered fast. Fine, he snapped. Then we'll go after your accounts, your retirement, spousal support, half of everything. Linda found her voice again, sharp and desperate. Yes, we'll do it the legal way. I nodded. Good. We can do it the legal way. Then I said the sentence that changed the room. But Brad doesn't get to sleep in my guest room tonight. Brad scoffed. We're not asking. I raised my phone again. And you don't get to threaten me at my table with my grandkids in the next room. Linda's voice turned frantic. Simon, you're embarrassing me. No, I said quietly. You embarrassed yourself when you used my grandson as your messenger. Brad stepped toward me, chest puffed out, trying intimidation. You think you're going to win this because you have paperwork? Linda is done with you. She's coming with me. I looked him dead in the eye. Then take her, but not from my house. Brad's hand twitched like he wanted to grab me, and right then, Ethan walked back in, phone in his hand, face tight. Dad, he said under his breath. Noah just told Melissa something else. My stomach dropped. What? Ethan's eyes flicked to Linda with disgust. Noah said Grandma told him you were leaving tonight, that you were going to go sleep somewhere else and Brad was going to move in. He said she promised them new rooms. Linda snapped. He's a child. Ethan's voice rose. You used my kid to plan your divorce. Melissa appeared behind him, pale and shaking. Mom, tell me that isn't true. Linda's eyes flashed. This is between me and Simon. Melissa's voice broke. You told my son you had a new husband. Linda turned on her like a stranger. I told him what was going to happen. Brad muttered, annoyed. This is getting out of hand. That was my second hook, right there. Not Brad's folder, not the speech at dinner. It was the fact that my wife had already moved me out in her mind, and she'd recruited my grandson to normalize it. In that instant, my anger cooled into something sharper. A plan. I looked at Linda. "You packed a bag for me?" She didn't answer, but her silence was loud. I walked to the coat closet, opened it, and found my overnight bag sitting there, already packed, my toiletries, a couple sweaters, a pill organizer. I stood there holding it, feeling my own life reduced to a suitcase I didn't pack. Melissa made a sound like she'd been punched. Ethan whispered, "Jesus." Brad shrugged. "It's practical." I turned slowly, bag in my hand, and faced them. "You wanted me out tonight," I said, "so you could move him in." Linda's eyes burned with hatred now that the mask was gone. "Yes, because you would never leave if I asked. You would drag it out. You would control it." I nodded, almost calm. "So you decided to ambush me on Christmas, in front of my children and grandchildren, and push me out like garbage." Brad's voice hardened. "Don't get sentimental." I looked at him. "Get out." He stepped forward again. "Or what?" I set the bag down and reached into my pocket. Not a weapon, not a threat, just my phone. I tapped, and the sound of a dial tone filled the room because my phone was connected to the small Bluetooth speaker in the corner, one of the things Linda insisted made the house feel modern. The call rang once, twice. "Stillwater," my attorney answered. Linda's face shifted instantly. Brad's eyes narrowed. I spoke clearly, loud enough that everyone heard. "Martin, I need you to file emergency separation paperwork first thing in the morning," I said. "And I need instructions for removing an uninvited guest from my home tonight." Linda's mouth fell open. Brad's face darkened. "You called a lawyer on Christmas?" "Yes," I said, "because you brought divorce papers to my dinner table like it was dessert." Martin's voice stayed professional. "Are you safe?" I looked at Brad. "Right now, yes." "Do you want law enforcement present?" Martin asked, "given the circumstances?" Linda hissed, "Simon, don't!" Brad snapped, "Hang up." I met Linda's eyes. "You chose public. You chose dramatic. You do not get to demand privacy now." Linda's voice turned pleading, but it was too late. "Think about the family." "I am," I said. "That's why I'm doing this." I ended the call and turned to Melissa and Ethan. "I'm not leaving," I told them. "This is my house tonight. Your kids will wake up in a home that feels safe. We will not teach them that betrayal gets rewarded." Brad scoffed. "You can't stop Linda." "I'm not trying to stop her," I said. "She can go wherever she wants. But she doesn't bring him into this house." Linda's voice shook. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the woman I'd loved was already gone. "You planned that," I said. "Not me." Melissa stepped forward, tears streaking her face. "Mom, why?" Linda's eyes flashed. "Because I wasted years being polite to a man who treats love like a contract." Ethan's voice was low and furious. "Mom, Dad paid for your life." Linda snapped. "He held it over me." Brad picked up his leather folder and shoved it back under his arm. "Fine, we'll go, but this isn't over." I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "It is for tonight," I said. Brad paused on the threshold, eyes cold. "You're going to regret humiliating her." I stepped closer until he had to look up at me. "You walked into my house and tried to take my place in front of my grandkids. If anyone should regret humiliation, it's you." He muttered something under his breath and stepped out. Linda didn't move. Melissa whispered, "Mom, please don't go with him." Linda's eyes were wet now, but her pride was stronger than love. She grabbed her coat and purse. As she walked past me, she stopped. "You think you won," she said softly, "but you're going to die alone." That was the cruelest thing she could think of, because she knew my first wife died, and it nearly killed me. She knew loneliness was my fear. I watched her leave anyway. The door closed. And for a moment the house was silent except for the movie Melissa had turned on for the kids, some cheerful cartoon soundtrack that felt like it belonged to another universe. I turned to my son and daughter. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't know." Ethan shook his head. "Dad, she did this, not you." Melissa wiped her face. "What happens now?" I took a breath. "Now I protect the kids, and I make sure Linda can't come back and rewrite what happened." That night, after the grandkids fell asleep on blankets in the living room, I didn't sit and cry. I didn't drink. I didn't stare at the tree and pretend I could fix it with nostalgia. I worked. I printed copies of everything. I emailed Martin every recording. I changed the locks on the side door and the garage code. I moved my important documents into the safe. I froze the joint credit card Linda had been using for holiday expenses. At 1:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you can take my life and keep your pride. We will take everything anyway." I stared at it, then showed Ethan. His face went hard. "That's Brad." I nodded. "Good." Because that text wasn't just anger. It was leverage. It was proof of intent. 2 days later, on December 26th, Linda came back. Not alone. Brad was in the driveway again, leaning against his truck like he was waiting for the world to apologize to him. Linda knocked like she still lived here. I opened the door, chain on. Melissa stood behind me, arms crossed. Ethan stood to my left. My grandkids were at Melissa's sister-in-law's house for the day. I'd made sure they weren't here. Linda's eyes flicked past me into the house. "Let me in." "No," I said. Brad smirked. "You can't lock her out." "I can," I said, "and I have." Linda's voice rose. "This is my home." "It was," I replied, "until you tried to move another man in and told my grandson to keep it secret." Brad's smile dropped. "We're not here to argue. We're here to get her things." "You can get them," I said, "with a police escort." Linda's eyes widened. "Police? For my clothes?" "For my safety," I said, "and for documentation." Brad's jaw clenched. "You're playing games." I shook my head. "No, I'm ending them." Linda's voice turned icy. "You froze the card." "Yes," I said, "and I sent your attorney's name to mine since you brought paperwork to my table." Brad stepped forward. "We're done being nice. Linda is entitled to half." I held my phone up. "Say that again. Tell me you're going to take everything." Brad's eyes flicked to the phone and he stopped himself, but Linda didn't have that instinct. "We're taking everything," she snapped, "because you don't deserve to keep it. You don't deserve to keep us." Melissa's voice broke. "Mom, you are not taking my kids." Linda turned on her. "Stay out of it." Ethan stepped forward. "You already dragged them into it." That's when Brad made his mistake. He reached past Linda and grabbed the chain with his hand, yanking it like he could force his way in. The sound was loud, metal snapping against the frame. I didn't flinch. I didn't shove him. I stepped back and said calmly, "Ethan, call 911." Brad froze. Linda's face twisted. "Simon, don't." Brad's voice went low and threatening. "You call the police and you'll regret it." I smiled again, small, controlled. "I already have your threats in writing," I said. "Now I'll have you on video trying to break into my home." Ethan had already started dialing. Brad backed away, hands up. "This is ridiculous." Linda's eyes were wild. "Stop. Stop right now." Melissa stared at her mother like she'd never seen her before. "Mom, who are you?" 2 squad cars arrived within minutes. Not because I'm important, because a man was recorded trying to force entry and making threats. Because I was calm and clear. Because I had evidence. Brad tried to talk his way out of it. He tried to charm the officers. He tried to act like I was a bitter old man making a holiday fuss. Then one officer stepped aside, looked at Brad again, and his posture changed. "Bradley Knox?" the officer asked. Brad's smirk twitched. "Yeah?" The officer's face went flat. Turn around. Linda's head snapped. What are you doing? Brad took a step back. Hold on. The officer repeated, firmer. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Brad's voice rose. For what? The officer didn't answer at first. He simply cuffed him. Then he said, You've got an outstanding warrant. Linda's face drained so fast it looked like someone pulled the color out of her. Brad started swearing under his breath, angry and panicked. Melissa whispered, Mom, you brought a wanted man to Christmas? Linda shook her head, trembling. No, I didn't know. Brad turned his head toward her, eyes blazing. Shut up. The officer guided him to the car while Brad fought, just enough to make it ugly. Linda stood on my porch, clutching her purse, watching the fantasy collapse in real time. And I felt something I didn't expect. Not victory, relief, because now it was obvious. To everyone. Linda's fresh start wasn't some romantic second chance. It was a disaster she'd dragged into our lives and tried to crown as a new husband in front of my grandkids. After Brad was taken away, Linda turned to me, shaking. You did this, she whispered. I stared at her. No, Linda, you did. I just stopped pretending. She started crying then, real tears, not performance. I made a mistake, she said. I was angry. I was lonely. I thought. I cut her off gently. You weren't lonely. You were bored, and you thought you could replace me like furniture. Melissa stepped forward, voice quiet and deadly. Mom, you told Noah to keep secrets. Linda looked at her like she'd been slapped. I didn't mean. Melissa shook her head. You don't get to not mean it. You did it. Linda looked back at me. Simon, please. I took a slow breath. Here's what happens, I said. You get your belongings with an escort. You do not come inside when the kids are here. You speak to my attorney, not me. Her lips trembled. And the marriage? I looked at the woman I thought I knew, and I felt my grief settle into something solid. The marriage ended when you packed my bag, I said. Linda's face crumpled. I didn't smile that time. I didn't enjoy her pain. But I also didn't rescue her from it. Over the next week, my lawyer filed. Linda's lawyer tried to bully. They tried to paint me as controlling. They tried to argue marital home and equitable division. Martin sent back the trust documents, the recordings, the text threat, and the police report showing the man she brought into my house had an outstanding warrant. The tone changed after that. Linda didn't get the house. She didn't get to walk back in and pretend Christmas was a misunderstanding. She didn't get to bring Brad's chaos into my family and call it love. What she got was a small settlement and a very clear boundary. My estate was locked down for my children and grandchildren. My life's work wasn't a prize for whoever humiliated me at a dinner table. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork. It wasn't the money. It was Noah. A week later, Noah asked me quietly, Grandpa, did I do something bad? I sat with him on the couch, the same couch where he used to climb into my lap during movies. I took his small hands in mine. No, I said. You told the truth, and truth is never bad. He looked down. Grandma said not to tell. I swallowed because my throat tightened the way it does when you realize an adult used a child like a tool. Grandma was wrong, I said, and it's not your job to carry adult secrets, ever. He nodded slowly like he was filing that lesson away for the rest of his life. That night, after everyone went home, I sat alone in the quiet house and looked at the Christmas tree still standing in the corner. The lights blinked like nothing had happened. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean, like a poison had finally been pulled from my life and I could breathe again. But I still wonder something, and I want an honest answer. Did I go too far by calling the police, locking her out, and cutting her off immediately? Or was it the only way to make sure my grandkids never had to learn that betrayal gets rewarded? What would you have done if you were me?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.